left off, we were talking about HACCP. And I want to cover that quickly, just as a refresher to get me back up to speed where I left off 2 weeks ago, I think it is. Today is May 8th, 2024, in the classroom at Trace and Petaluma. Last time was, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks ago, something like that. All right, HACCP, H-A-C-C-P, HACCP. In the new term that is being tested is called active managerial control. Active managerial control. These are food safety management systems. So when you look at these food safety management systems, there are prerequisite programs that have to be in place in order to make it work. So I used to stand on chairs like this chair over here with 4 legs. I have 2 chairs, right? There's 8 prerequisite program systems, programs that we talk about in this particular book, but there are others that I have on my other presentation that I made during the pandemic. But we'll cover that later. Anyway, there's a personal hygiene program, supplier selection and specification program, the cleaning and sanitation program, facility design and equipment maintenance, food safety training programs, obviously, quality control and assurance, SOP, standard operating procedures, and pest control programs. So in order for the food safety management systems to work, either active managerial control or HACCP, we have to have all these other prerequisites programs in place. So here in the Coast Guard, we have TTPs, Tactics, Training, and Procedure publications that the Coast Guard has, identifying a lot of these things. So personal hygiene program for them is in their medical handbook. So cleaning and sanitizing is in the FSS, Food Safety and Sanitation, TTP for the cooks, right? So it all depends on, they have multiple publications that fuse together with their TTP for the Coast Guard. Everything in this book, this is ServSafe. This is one of the programs that is taught throughout the nation. They have to be ANSI, American National Standards Institute, and CFP, Conference for Food Protection approved. Any test, any training you go through needs to be ANSI, CFP approved and authorized. Otherwise, it's no good. So you might find a cheap one online that you can just go through real quick, take the test, get a certificate, hand it to your health department, and the health department's going to say, hey, it's the wrong one. It's not there. I gave PIC training. So I gave this whole food safety class previously, and I charged 2 prices. I charged, I think it was $120 for the food safety management manager certification class and exam, and that included the exam and the whole 8-hour class. And you could have a second person come and sit in. One of you would take the test, so that was the higher rate that I charged, and the other person would just sit in to gather the information at $50 a pop. So one person's paying $120, the other person's paying $50. 2 people, one person takes the test, the other person just gets the information. And then I would print off a little certificate, I'd hand it to them. Well, they took that up to Ukiah, California, and they hung it on the wall, which was great. The problem is that it wasn't ANSI CFP. The training was the appropriate training, but the actual certificate wasn't. The other employee who took the test had that certificate, and that's the one that they needed to hang on the wall. They just hadn't done it yet. But anyway, we fixed that problem. It was fine. There was no issues. I wasn't trying to be a certified or get one of these on the sly. It just happened to be one of the marketing techniques that I used to get more people into the class, to teach more people, train more people, and that was okay. All right, so ANSI CFP needs to be whatever test you take, and there are new ones that are online. that people are taking. And then the normal ones that I've been working with for years. All right, HACCP. Hazard analysis. What's the old word for hazard? The new term is contaminant. Contaminant, and the old word is hazards, which are biological, chemical, and physical. Right? We know about that. 7 principles to HACCP, 5 prerequisite programs. We talked about that on the last video, so I'm not going to go into that. But when it was the changeover that the FDA retail food safety professionals wanted restaurants to pick up a voluntary system of HACCP. So retail HACCP, or street HACCP, is just the down and dirty, quick style of HACCP. So we have those principles, but when we talk about street HACCP or retail HACCP, we look at a menu and we have to break down what the different techniques in cooking. So there are 3 types of cooking, right? If this is my temperature danger zone, 41 to 135, all right. We look at a menu. There's 3 types of items on the menu and techniques of cooking that we have to pay attention to. So if I have a deli, the types of food I'll have is what's called no cook. No cook, so this is the number 1. All the food on the menu is a ready-to-eat food. It's an RTE, ready-to-eat food. So that means we really have to watch our cross-contamination. All the food stays below 41 degrees until it's prepared and served, like deli sandwiches and salads and items such as that. Then there's the cook serve style, which is number 2. And these are where you have a ground hamburger or a piece of chicken breast, and you're going to make a hamburger on a bun with lettuce and tomato and serve it to a customer immediately. So we're going to cook all the way up to the required temperature, which we know our critical limit for a hamburger is 155 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? If I had a chicken sandwich, I have to make that 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That's my critical limit, right? So no cook, my critical limit for the number 1 no cook, ready-to-eat foods, is 41 degrees and lower Fahrenheit. That's my critical limit for HACCP, hazard analysis. What could be there? What are the problems associated with the menu items throughout? So hazard analysis is, and just to recap, anywhere in the process where we can prevent, eliminate, or reduce to acceptable levels. A hazard analysis is any food items that we're going to serve customers and people. We have to make sure it's safe. So with this, I need to look at the food and analyze it, all the pieces and parts on the menu. I have to figure out biological, chemical, and physical hazards. What could potentially get into the food, right? So again, I have 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Verification, verifications, record keeping, right? Hazard analysis of the food. So let's talk about this hamburger, for instance. Hazard analysis of a hamburger. So the hazards or the contaminants in this book, they call them contaminants now. But then when we talk about hazard analysis or HACCP, you have to use the older term, which is hazards, all right, which are biological, chemical, and physical. So what is the biological potential in a hamburger? When there's 1,000 animals that are butchered down, one of them may be contaminated with the feces, right, that has E. coli 157H7 in it, it can, once they go in the hopper, get ground into meat. All that ground up meat can be contaminated by that one animal that was contaminated in the beginning because it wasn't cleaned properly, right? So biological could be E. coli. All right. Physically, what else can be in a hamburger potentially? We can have a bone or a staple or a piece of plastic or something like that. If you can hold it in your hand and bite on it, then it's considered physical, right? So we'll say a bone. All right. And chemically, I talked about Chef Jamie Oliver from the United Kingdom, where about 10 years ago he did a video on pink slime burgers, right? And he was calling out, he's doing all these wonderful things. He's an awesome chef, awesome guy. And his heart's in the right place, and he's doing all the right things, and he's trying to teach and train and show people what's going on in the food in the school system. Because he needs and he wants the food to be safe for the children. And in this particular case, he was talking about pink slime burgers. So they're trying to get away from that injected ammonia gas. But at the time, it was kind of a scare, and everybody said, oh, no more pink slime. So ammonia, in a long story, ammonia is that just like I talked about the cantaloupe melons, and we have in the water treatment, when we drink water from public water systems, there's an amount of chlorine in there to keep the pipes safe and to prevent any new bacteria from coming in. When certain leafy greens and products and fruits and vegetables are washed through a wash basin, in those companies, sometimes, oftentimes, there's some type of chemical in there to kill off the bad things. In this particular case, they're using ammonia gas at an appropriate level. MCL is maximum contaminant level in water treatment. So MCLs, and it would be the same thing. There could be enough to kill the bacteria, but not enough to cause us injury or health issues, supposedly, right? So when you go to your faucet and drink water, you're drinking an amount of chlorine. When you eat fruits and vegetables, they've been washed with some type of chemical, oftentimes. Sometimes it's just either temperature, and now they have irradiation, right? So they zap it, UV, things like that. So there's multiple techniques. In this case, I'm just talking about the pink slime burgers, which was the ammonia gas that was in the hamburgers. And so to fill out my explanation of HACCP, I have to talk about the ammonia that could potentially be there, or not. You know, it could or could not be. All right, hazard analysis. Anywhere in the process, and the process includes purchasing and receiving and storing and prepping and cooking and holding and cooling and reheating and serving. This is the flow of food, where you can prevent it from happening in the first place, eliminate it if it happens to get in there, or reduce to acceptable levels industry-wide. I talked about on the last one, when you go to the doctor and you have an operation, they're going to take a knife and cut you open. What do they do with that knife first? They have to sterilize it. What do we do in our galleys? We sanitize, so it's different. With the sterilization, it kills 100% of the bad things. With sanitizing, it reduces to acceptable levels. So when I wash this table, I have a green bucket, a white bucket, and a red bucket. The green bucket is soap, detergent, and water. The white bucket is just clean water. And the last one is a red bucket. It has either quaternary ammonium compound, an ammonia derivative, right? There's multi-quats, and or chlorine, which is bleach, or iodine, which I used in the Army for water treatment, for the Lister bags, for the troops on the ground, and they'd go and refill their canteens out of a Lister bag full of water that we would fill up. But we had to dose that water with iodine first before we could serve the soldiers so they didn't get sick back in the 1980s. And I did that for just a short time. Later, years later, I became a water treatment guy, and we were using chlorine all the time, or chloramines, to treat the water and make sure the water for drinking water was safe. Prior to 1908, when a doctor jumped the fence in Jersey City Waterworks, right, and dosed the water at the water treatment plant with chlorine, prior to that, people were getting sick all the time from various diseases that are waterborne diseases. Here we're talking about foodborne diseases, but waterborne diseases are there also, including the foodborne diseases, like the viruses can be there, and the bacteria can be there as well. All right, so how do I prevent salmonella from growing in the first place? I keep it in the refrigerator. So purchasing, receiving, storing, that would be my critical control point, right? All of these are control points, but which one is the critical one? Where can I either prevent it from happening in the first place or eliminate anything from getting in if it happens to be there? So for instance, what's my critical limit for a hamburger? Purchasing, receiving, storing, prepping, cooking is my critical control point, and the critical limit is 155. I have to cook to kill. I have to kill off that pathogen. So I have to make sure I hit 155 for an amount of time to kill off that pathogen that's inside the hamburger so it doesn't make anybody sick, right? If I don't hit this temperature, if I'm lower, like some people want it to be lower, I want a rare hamburger, a medium rare hamburger, great, here you go. But on the bottom of your menu, you have to have a consumer risk advisory message saying, dear customer, this is undercooked, you could get sick. And that's kind of a disclaimer. But that's the intention of that. Okay, so I'm jumping around here. Reduce to safe levels. When I sanitize with my red bucket on the table, wash, rinse, my soap and water gets rid of most everything. I rinse it, it goes on the floor, then it goes down the drain, and then I sanitize the table. If I have 1 million bacteria there, it'll reduce it to acceptable levels. I might have 10 bacteria left. It's not 100% like when you go for an operation with the doctor, but it's reduced to acceptable levels. Sanitizing reduces to acceptable levels. When we cook to kill, I say. Poultry is a 7 log reduction at this temperature, 165 degrees for instantaneous. Well, let me flip this over. No. So the bacterial growth curve, just like I was talking about before, we have a lag phase, we have a log phase, and we have a stationary and decline or a death phase, right? Log phase, logarithmic growth, doubling every 20 minutes-ish, right? Lag phase. So remember, we live in the lag phase. How many hours can I leave a lasagna out on the table? 4 hours. Then it has to be sold, consumed, or discarded, right? How many hours can I leave a potato salad out there? 6 hours. So long as it stays below 70 degrees, right? Because when I pull that potato salad out of the refrigerator, it's warming up from the refrigerator. So long as it stays below 70, we're okay, right? But hot food, we only have 4 hours because it's coming down through this double danger zone from 70 to 125. Right? So that's why we have 4 hours. We have 6 hours where the bacteria is settling in. After the 4 hours on the hot food, then the logarithmic growth can potentially cause people to get sick. So that's why the scientists and the industry has determined 4 hours is our time frame. That's our catch-all answer. Unless it's cold food that we remove from the refrigerator, and it's 6 hours. Right? And then my favorite bacteria, which one? Listeria, which is another pathogen that kills many people. How many days can I hold a macaroni chopped salad in the refrigerator and still serve it legally? 7 days, because now I'm below 41 degrees, but Listeria grows in the refrigerator. What temperature is freezing? On a freezing day, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And what temperature is our freezer machine? 0 degrees. So the 32 is freezing of water, or water will start to freeze, and that's where Listeria stops growing. It doesn't die off, it doesn't go away. No bacteria potentially does, but it stops growing here. So if the bacteria has grown to this level, when I take it out of the refrigerator or the freezer and I let it warm up again, the bacteria continues to take up from where it stopped. It never goes back down to 0 unless you cook to kill, right? And I said it's a 7 log reduction. 7 log reduction means, so 99.9 is a 3 log. 4, 5, 6, 7, 99.99999 is a 7 log reduction of killing the pathogens. right? So we kill it backwards, kill backwards, kill backwards, right? If we hit our proper temperatures. But if we don't hit the temperature, then the bacteria is still there and it can potentially grow and cause problems. Okay, let's go back to street HACCP. So I talked about the bacterial growth curve on the last part. We have 4 hours, 6 hours, 7 days of storage. Everything has to be labeled. The 4 hours and the 6 hours, if we're going to use that technique, it's called time as a public health control. It is one of the check boxes on the health department's inspection sheet. If you use that technique, you have to have an SOP, standard operating procedure. You're supposed to submit it to the health department so they know that you use that technique. And then when you use it, you have to have your records. You have to have your SOP with you, and you have to tag the products. So if I have lasagna, I'm going to make a label, tag it. The time I remove it from the heat, right, I'm going to have a piece of tape. I'm going to make a plus sign, Mr. F. Everybody knows who to talk to. Lasagna is the name. I pulled it from the refrigerator or the hot holding at noon, and I have to sell it by 1600 or 4 o'clock p.m. Right? If it is cold food, I put a 70 down here because I know I have to keep it below 70. Mr. F again. I have potato salad. I remove it from refrigeration at noon, and it has to be sold, consumed, or discarded by 1800, which is 6 p.m. civilian time, right? Because it's growing up through here. So we want to prevent the rapid and progressive growth of the potential bacteria. Now, some bacteria grow and get in your gut and infect you and make you sick over days, over time. Some bacteria grow in the food and die off and become toxic on the death phase of time, so toxins, right? So then you eat the food, and within minutes to a half hour, you're vomiting and have diarrhea because you just got poisoned, right? And then other ones, like my E. coli, gets into your gut, causes havoc, then it creates toxins, infects your kidneys, hemolytic uremitic syndrome, and you die, or you can die. So, cook to kill the bacteria. We need to prevent. We are the professionals, cooks, and we have to make sure we do the best we know how to keep our customers safe and happy. Remember, this whole training, food safety people don't really care about the taste and flavor. They do, but they don't. They want to make sure that everybody is safe when they eat this stuff, right? Public health, public safety. All right, so let's get rid of this. Get rid of this. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. Good. So now back to street HACCP or retail HACCP or food service operations. We analyze the food. Where can we prevent, eliminate, or reduce to safe levels? Then we determine the critical control points. Critical control points. Purchasing, receiving, and storing, prepping, cooking, holding, cooling, reheating, and serving. Where can I prevent salmonella from growing? Storage. Refrigerator. What temperature? 41. How do I eliminate E. coli in a hamburger? Cook to kill. Up to 155 to kill off that pathogen, potentially. All right, so this is cook serve. So you're holding it below 41 degrees until you actually cook it and then serve it, and then watch your cross-contamination, of course. Now, the third is, number 3, is called cook chill. Excuse me, cook chill. So in this method, this is a multi-day product. I cook a chili, right? I have to keep all the ingredients below 41 degrees. Here, so that's 1. Then I cook. My chili is going to be cooking at a simmer for many hours. What are my ingredients in the chili? Let's say I have chicken meat in the chili. So what temperature must I have? What's my critical limit right? For critical limit, my critical limit for chicken here was 165. So it stands to reason my critical limit for chicken here, because it's a chicken chili or a turkey chili, is 165 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So I have to cook all the way up to 165. Now if I have a simmer, I'm going to be almost at 200 degrees anyway, so that captures everything. Great. Now, at the end of the day, or in the process, we're going to cool it down to 70 within 2 hours, because that is the required time for cooling food. From 135 to 70, you have 2 hours. So at 135 is when the time really starts. From 165, or like I said, I'm simmering. Simmering is between 185 and 200, 205, depending on which cookbook you look at. For the one here at Trayson, we go to 200 degrees. For the one that I grew up with at my culinary, my cookbook was on cooking. That one is 185 to 205. So we'll go, I'm here at Trayson, so we'll go with 185 to 200 for simmering, right? From the 200 degrees, I don't really have to worry about it or pay attention to it too much until it hits 135. As soon as it hits 135, that's when I have my 2 hours of cooling time to get it to 70. Then I put it in the fridge at 70 and I cool it to 41 degrees Fahrenheit within 4 more hours. So I have 4 hours here, okay? So it's a total 6-hour time frame I'm allowed, if I'm doing it properly, to cool the food from hot to cold, below 41, to prevent the rapid and progressive growth of that lag phase, log phase, stationary, and decline of the bacterial growth curve, right? So we're inhibiting that rapid and progressive growth. Now, the next day, I'm going to reheat it and serve it. So now I have to reheat it up to, and whenever we reheat anything, it's got to reach 165 again, right? For hot holding. If I'm going to reheat it for immediate service, if I'm going to take the chili, warm it up for like 5 seconds, put it on a plate and serve somebody immediately, that's okay because it's still safe here, even if it's cold. Kind of like days you put a pizza in the refrigerator, you pull it out, you pull the pizza out, you eat the pizza right from the refrigerator. That's okay because you did the cooking properly, you did the cooling properly, and it's still safe. So if it's for immediate service, you can feed them at any temperature. But for this street HACCP, for this retail HACCP, if we're going to put it on the hot holding line, we must get it back to 165, right? Within 2 hours, it's got to be quick, within 2 hours to 165, right? If it's going to be sitting for a long amount of time. So this is the cook chill. We cook it to the proper temperature, cook to kill. Then we cool it properly to prevent any extra bacteria or pathogens or contaminants from getting in there, hazards, right? And then we reheat for service, either immediate or we reheat to 165 for that. Okay. So this is what we call our retail HACCP. Hazard analysis, critical control points, critical limits. We know our critical limits. Things have to be below 41 degrees or above 155, depending on what it is, 165, depending on what it is. Right? Then I monitor. How do I monitor? I use my thermometer. I take the thermometer and I poke the food. Right? I make sure, I poke, 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 and make sure that I'm getting proper temperatures and times. All right? Then I have corrective actions. What if I'm cooking my hamburger and it's only 125? My corrective action is to continue to cook until I make 155. That's the corrective action. If there's a problem, you fix it. Corrective action, you fix the problem. Right? So this is our retail HACCP. In 2006, they tried to get us to do retail HACCP. And restaurants were like, it's too much work. In my humble opinion, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I introduce it to my students. Because when I was a restaurateur, I had my restaurant in San Francisco on Union Square, and this is when I went to those classes. In 2001, I became certified for ServSafe to become an instructor. Right? I went up to Sacramento to California Restaurant Association, and we were in a bank vault. Right? So I guess the Restaurant Association had taken over an old bank, and down in the basement was the bank vault, you know, where money is and everything. Big, huge door, just like a vault, because it was. And we're sitting in there with Kathy, and she was our instructor and got us all squared away. And everything was paperwork. There was no digital at that time. So we had binders, and we had paperwork, and we had highlighters and pens and all those kind of things to go over the basic training and to become certified as an instructor and a proctor for giving the ServSafe training and the doggone exams. Right? So two different animals. One is instructor, one is proctor. So you assign, you agree for both things, right? That you won't divulge their secrets and things like that. Yeah, I mean, the way that I teach this, everything that I'm doing is coming in out of the FDA food code. FDA food code, which is where these companies get their information, and they take it and they make it into a book and then they sell it. So all I'm doing, this is from the HACCP book, right? This isn't from ServSafe. This is from the HACCP book, Retail HACCP from the FDA. The information is from FDA, not ServSafe. There's some parts in ServSafe that we talk about, but it's not like I'm teaching anything or talking about anything now that's theirs. All right. Now, active managerial control, because, like I said, in 2000, let's see, in the 1960s, HACCP was developed for the space program NASA. Rocket scientists literally came up with HACCP on how to keep the astronauts safe by paying attention to all of these things. 1960s. So where did they get the information? It was the Army, the Air Force, NASA, and the Pillsbury Doughboy, Pillsbury Company. They got together and they came up with this system, HACCP, for the space program. And then later, over years, we have the canning industry, cans. Then later we had the meat industry, then the fish industry, and the poultry, and the juice, J-U-I-C-E, and the milk, and cook chill, right? Because of a lot of things. And then there's sous vide. Means under vacuum. It's been in existence for, I don't know, 50 years now. And it's finally making market, and the health department hated it, scared of it. And sous vide is a technique of, you take foods, you put it in a plastic container bag, and you put it in a warm water circulator bath for an amount of time at a certain temperature. There's a regulated temperature, and it cooks the food to a perfect doneness. Then you take it out of the bag, and then you either torch it or put it on a planchette to give it color, and then you serve it to your customer. So it's always done exactly right. Yeah. And during the time, people were freaked out about it. So New York said, nope, we're not going to do this. We're going to say no way at all. And so restaurateurs had to go and teach and train them. And I think it was Chef Thomas Keller had to go back there and actually train them about sous vide, introduce it to them, explain the goodness of it and the safety of it if it's done properly and correctly. So with HACCP and with sous vide or under vacuum or no oxygen, like I said on the last video, is you have to send that packet information, your plan, up to California State Health Department. They have to approve it before you can actually operate it. So in Fat Tom, right? Food, acid, time, temperature, oxygen, moisture, which are the 6 things that bacteria need to grow. Time and temperature is what normal cooks work with. But if you're going to be fancy and you're going to do acid, oxygen, or moisture, then you have to create a HACCP plan showing that you know how to do it properly and safely. I know our forefathers have been doing it for centuries, millennia probably, you know, drying things out, canning, jarring, things like that. But even if you look in the books on the canning, right, the Ball Cookbook, first page is all about food safety and making sure that the spore-forming bacteria, botulism, Bacillus cereus, Clostridium perfringens. Botulism is the one we're worried about mostly with oxygen or lack of oxygen because they're anaerobic. But the other one, my favorite, was Listeria because it grows in the fridge, it grows out of the fridge, it grows everywhere. It grows with oxygen, it grows without oxygen. It doesn't care, it's facultative bacteria, so it grows with or without oxygen. So because of the oxygen, because of Listeria and botulism, botulism E. echo can grow down to 38 degrees, right? We have 41, then we have 38 degrees, which is in the refrigerator depending on your fridge. So botulism could be growing in there if you put it in a bag and throw it in the fridge and don't pay attention to it. So with HACCP, purchasing and receiving and storing and prepping and cooking and holding and cooling and reheating and serving, the storage of vacuum-packed foods has to be at a certain temperature, has to be at that certain temperature to prevent the bacteria from growing, and less than or over time. So there's a certain amount of days that you can't hold it past that. So if I have a whole bunch of food stored in this refrigerator, it can't go past a certain number of days. And I don't know that number off the top of my head. I want to say 10 days, but I could be wrong. But I think it has to be lower than 34 degrees for fewer than 10 days. Could be 7 days. But same concept. It's all about paying attention to it, labeling it, date marking it, making sure that you're straight. In 2006, so 1960s, NASA, space program. All these other industries over the years, now restaurants. And the restaurants said, nope, we don't want to do it, right? We don't want to do it, too much work. So then they came up with it, they rebranded it and called it active managerial control. So active managerial control focuses on the 5 risk factors. So risks and hazards. It's all about risks. Risks and hazards. So the risks, there's 5 risk factors. 37% of the problem, percent of the problem is improper holding. So holding temperatures, right? So when you purchase your food at one of the big distributors for food, they were actually, their truck drivers would deliver food and drop it off inside of a storage facility and close the door on a hot summer day. No refrigeration, no freezing, no temperature control. The truck drivers would just drop it off and leave. And then the representatives or the other lower distributor people would come and pick it up and then deliver it to the restaurants. And they got caught and they got in trouble for it, and it cost them millions of dollars because of that technique. So they don't do it anymore, but the other guys still do. The other companies that weren't caught still do those type of things. So when you call your rep and say, hey, I need a Pismo tenderloin, right, delivered to me, or 6 of them, all right, and they throw it in the back of their car and they drive it to you. In the back of their car, probably on the floorboards, where the dust and the dirt and the nasties are, that their dog puked or their dog hair is all there. Know your suppliers. Take a tour of your suppliers. Go see your suppliers. Make sure you're happy with your suppliers. Supplier selection and specification programs. You have to trust those guys. When I had milk, right? At CIA we had milk. We're trying to put together a HACCP plan. And this is when I was just understanding it. I didn't really understand it very well. And anyway, I reached out to the milk people and I said, may I please have a letter of guarantee for your milk? And they said, sure. So they sent me a form saying that they're going to hold their milk at 45 degrees for an amount of time, and that's okay, and that's part of their HACCP system. And I thought that was great. But I got a letter of guarantee from that particular company, and that goes into my system, into my folder, so that when my health department comes in and says, hey, where do you get this? I can flip over that. I have a letter of guarantee saying they take care of their products all the way. Trust who you're buying from. All right, so risks and hazards. So holding temperatures, right? Proper holding temperatures, we have to make sure it is, right? That's my 41 to 135. If it's hot food, it needs to be 135 or better. It needs to have been cooked to a proper temperature first. So like lasagna is a layered food, it needs to go to 165 or better to make sure that it's all safe on the inside. Then it needs to hold at 135 or better, right? The whole time until it's sold, unless you're going to use time as a public health control. 19% of the problem is poor personal hygiene. First, hygiene. And that is dirty cooks, people who are dirty, right? I've watched so many times where people wear the aprons, go smoke, you know, spit, whatever, wiping on their aprons, wiping on themselves, and carrying bloody meat, and then trying to make a sandwich for somebody. It's all about cross-contamination and poor personal hygiene. People are not paying attention to themselves, keeping themselves healthy. On the inspection form it says, you know, I'm going to look at your eyes and nose and mouth and make sure nothing's coming out of you. There should be no snot and no sneezing and no eye discharge, because something would be going on inside the person potentially. So with that, personal hygiene is a big thing. The FDA has a personal hygiene booklet, and it has forms in there for you, the restaurateur, to utilize when you hire. It's a hiring packet, part of the hiring packet. So when you hire people, you have this booklet. It's a PDF booklet. Now I have a hardcover, but you can actually put it on the copy machine and make copies for each employee, and they sign saying, if I'm sick, if I have a reportable disease, one of the big 6 reportable disease here in California is big 7, I will report it to you instead of hiding it. Oh no, I need to work. You do, I know. We're low-wage people, right? Somebody said it, one of the food safety, so the food safety podcast says the lowest paid people are the ones responsible for feeding you, which is kind of true, right? So we expect these lowest paid people to be rocket scientists and feed us properly. And it all depends on the management and the ownership as to, even though they're lower paid, they're properly trained. That's the key. Properly trained, properly supervised, and that's what active managerial control is talking about. Food safety management system, active managerial control, is talking about that we have these 5 risk factors. There's 5 of them, risks, factors, right? And so it's risks and hazards that we're worried about. And what are the 3 hazards? We'll get into that: biological, chemical, and physical, right? All right, 16% of the problem is improper cooking, right? Double check myself. Nope, contaminated equipment. Using contaminant, so cross-contamination. Using contaminated equipment. If I use my knife, kind of like I was just describing poor personal hygiene, the people have to be healthy to work with food and serve customers, right? Healthy and have good, clean sanitation habits. Our habits are, we clean uniform, we come in, we wash our hands, we cover our sneeze, we wear a hairnet if necessary, or a hat. Keeping, remember last time, staph, S-T-A-P-H, comes from the S-T-A-F-F. It's in our hair, nose, throats, open wounds, open sores, coughing, sneezing, hacking, drooling. When I worked in 1981, I think, I was a host or a busboy, and the cooks had a garbage can at the end of their cook's line, and they were spitting to make kind of like basketball or soccer or whatever game you want to say, but the peripheral saliva goes sideways onto the cutting boards, and that's Staphylococcus, potentially aureus, that can grow if there's protein there, and then we would make sandwiches. They would make sandwiches. I was the kid, I wasn't the cook then, but I remember that. And so staph comes from the staph, right? People do stupid things. Other people get mad at a customer, they'll spit in their food, right? But if the bacteria over time grows through lag phase, log phase, stationary, and decline, then it becomes a toxin on the backside, and people have vomiting and diarrhea because of Staphylococcus aureus. Right? So staph comes from the staph. We have to watch our personal hygiene. We as leaders, the managers, the management, chefs, sous chefs, have to watch our employees, management oversight, to make sure that everybody is doing the right thing. Okay, 16% cross-contaminated, using contaminated equipment. Make sure that we wash, rinse, sanitize, and air dry our knives before, after chicken, and before we go to salad, right? And our boards and our tables. That's why we have a 3-bucket system for cleaning our tables. Our table won't fit in the 3-compartment sink, so we wash it, we rinse it, we sanitize it, we let it air dry, and then we go back to work. So 11% of the problem. Now 11%, we have our, there it is, inadequate cooking. We talked about the cooking temperatures, right, before. So what is our critical limit for chicken? We have 165 degrees Fahrenheit that we need to make for chicken. Right? We have 155 degrees Fahrenheit for ground meat, ground fish. 145 degrees Fahrenheit for whole pieces of meat. Right? So if I have, usually I have some things here that I can show. I have little squeaky toys, dog toys. One looks like a chicken, one looks like a fish, one looks like a piece of steak. Anyway, so wherever the butcher puts the knife, right, we're going to put the knife. Wherever the knife goes is where the bacteria is now. So the bacteria is on the surface of the steak, on the surface of the fish. It's not down in it, but it's on the surface. So because I'm going to cook the internal temperature of a steak or a piece of fish or a lamb chop, it needs to reach 145 degrees, 145 degrees. All right? Now if I grind it, mince it, chop it, if I chop it all up and grind it and turn it into a hamburger, now where's the bacteria? It's all inside too. So now we go to 155 degrees. If I use a jacquard is a bunch of needles. And I take the steak and I take the needles and I chunk, 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 and I needle it. It makes this more tender, and I can put marinade in there, and the marinade will go down in there. And so when I chunk it and flavor inject it or use a jacquard to tenderize it, then we're going to 155 degrees, 155 degree temperature, okay? And poultry, chicken, turkey, duck, squab, pheasant, all the birds, all the little birds, will go to 165. Now ratites are the big birds, ostrich, emu, rhea, the big ones, so they go to 155. But otherwise, all of the little birds are supposed to go to 165. Now duck, you talk about duck, all right, chefs. We're going to serve those undercooked, but what's on the bottom of your recipe, menu? A consumer risk advisory message, which we're going to get to here in a second. So 11% is cooking temperatures, proper cooking. And then 6% of the problem is food from unsafe sources. So we have to make sure we purchase everything from that approved supplier, that approved reputable supplier. How do we know they're approved and reputable? Because they're inspected, and you talk to your other chefs in the neighborhood and they'll say, oh yeah, these guys are good, those guys are bad. Stay away from them and work with them. So you get a good, approved, reputable supplier that you work with. When I was in San Francisco and I was opening my restaurant, I talked to my old chef, Chef Brenda, and I said, well, I knew who she bought from because I was the one who was doing the purchasing and receiving at her restaurant, and they would deliver to me. So I had that relationship, and then I go to open my restaurant, and I contacted those same people, and I had that same relationship, right? As long as I had the money to pay for it, which thankfully I did. So these are the 5 risk factors, and these are the hazards that we have to pay attention to. So to go along with the 5 risk factors that we worry about, there are 5 interventions that we talk about. So intervention number 1 is the demonstration of knowledge. Interventions is what they're called, interventions. All right, so a demonstration of knowledge. Number two, I have employee health policies. Employee health policies, procedures, right? I said there's that FDA, the FDA personal hygiene booklet that you can use as a guide. The ServSafe book has some. The FDA food safety guide has so much more, right? Then we have time and temperature control. 3, time and temperature control. Then we have hands as a vehicle of contamination is 4. Making sure that we're washing our hands all the time. And finally, 5 is a consumer risk advisory message, CRAM. Consumer risk advisory message to make sure that we're telling people if you choose to eat these raw foods, you could get sick. All right, I'm going to stop for now and I have to go back to work up here. Thanks very much. Okay. So just quickly, I want to get the active managerial control because, anyway, class is back and I'm up there, but they're in cleanups right now, so I'll just do this real quick. All right, there's 6 areas for, we had 7 HACCP systems. All the different industries run HACCP. The restaurant industry, in 2006, they said voluntary HACCP or street HACCP, which I described, you know, the no cook, the cook serve, and the cook chill process of cooking. So you look at the menu and you identify all those things, which food items on your menu are assigned, and then you create SOPs and you actually take times and temperatures and pay attention. And HACCP is a written, systematic, scientific approach to food safety where you actually pay attention and you do things. But it's written, it's a written program, and one that works for one operation will not work for another operation. Same thing for the Coast Guard. When you're on one boat, you go to a land unit, the same CCPs won't work here for there, probably. But last video I described walking and the 5 preliminary steps for HACCP. Here again, I'm talking about street HACCP for us, the retail, like restaurants and delis and things like that. All right, and in the book, in 2006, they said, okay, we want you to do HACCP, and the restaurant said, no, we're not going to do it. So in 2009, then they repackaged it, and they said, oh, okay, well, we're going to call it active managerial control, and we're going to have 6 steps to active managerial control. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is verification, 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 just like that, reevaluation. So basically, just like in HACCP, we have verify, verify, and reevaluate, eval the program to make sure it's working properly. If you get new equipment, then you have to incorporate the new equipment. If you were doing new food items, you have to incorporate the new food items. So it all depends on what it is. Identify risks is number 1. ID risks. So what were the 5 risk factors? We had 37%, we had 19%, 16%, 11%, 6%. So improper storage, personal hygiene, cooking, cross-contamination or using contaminated equipment, and food from unsafe sources. So identify the risks from HACCP and from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, did a study years ago, and they determined that these were the main 5 major risk factors. And one of my students over at CIA, they're like, hey, Mr. F, I added that together, it doesn't equal 100%. No, there's 1% and 0.5%, and there's a whole slew of other ones that are identified to make up the 100%, but these were the big 5 ones that we want to focus on. So that's why the food safety books are written for the big 5, or the main 5 risk factors. And then, so risks and hazards. What were the hazards or the contaminants? Contaminants or hazards is biological, chemical, physical, and then there could be radiological. It all depends on what's going on, okay? Monitoring. So monitoring. So you, the manager, have management oversight. You're paying attention. You're training your people. You're making sure they're doing the right thing. So you identify the risks and how to prevent them, how to stop that from happening, and have your prerequisite programs in order, in operation in order to address these things, right? So we have that. Monitor, so you are the manager, you're the leader, you're the PIC, person in charge, petty officer in charge in this case, because we're the Coast Guard, and military members. So when you're monitoring, and as you monitor by either taking temperatures, paying attention, watching, observing, one of the things when the health department walks in the door, they're supposed to stand in the corner and just watch. That's the thing. They want to see what people's habits are, right? They're not going to go exactly to that chicken and check the chicken. They may, but first they want to observe. They want to see your eyes, nose, coughing, sneezing, drooling, something coming out of your eyeballs. So we need to make sure that people are healthy, right? So you identify the risks, all these things, then you monitor by paying attention. You're actively managing. This is active managerial control. So you're actively paying attention. You're not just saying, oh, just run with it, I don't care, or whatever, right? So monitoring is a big one. And then corrective actions. So just like on my HACCP, corrective actions is when there's a problem, fix it. If you notice an employee being dirty and doing bad things, who was that kid in one of the fast chain restaurants? He was standing with his boots in the lettuce, right? What's the corrective action? Well, throw away that lettuce and fire him, and somebody recognized the environment and actually went down there and fired him, and made sure everything was good and clean. But corrective actions, you fix the problems, whatever those problems are. When you monitor, you're paying attention, and then you're fixing the problems when they arise, right? And training. It's training, retraining. So there's the initial and ongoing training. When you first hire something, like here, we get students, a bunch of students at a time, each class, multiple classes throughout the year. So the initial training is the Serve Safe Food Manager training, right? It's a 16-hour training, and then they get the test on the third day with the review. And then we reinforce it while we're in the galley. Upper galley is the one-on-one training, so there's 14 or 18 of them, depending on how many. And we have one-on-one training, so we're identifying, watching them individually, making sure that they are coming up to our standards. And then once they finish this section, then they go to bake shop, then they go to nutrition, then they go down the hill and actually cook for the base. And in this whole apprenticeship program, it's terrific, and they get some real quality hands-on training from soup to nuts all the way down there, and then they go off to the fleet, and they're doing great things. We have people who have been in for a while, but they just took first place in culinary and first place worldwide, right? The competitions are worldwide, and not only military, it's civilian worldwide for baking and pastry also. So both a CS1 and a chief took those. The chief used to be an instructor here, awesome. And then there's so many other CSs from the Coast Guard that compete in all of these competitions worldwide. I think they went to Germany a couple of years ago and did a worldwide competition for culinary. So it's there. The opportunities are here at Coast Guard. I'm a civilian, I just work here. But you know, I was Army for 13 years back in the 80s and 90s, so it's a different animal now, I know that. But this really impresses me, and the way the Coast Guard is doing their job, and the quality of candidates or apprentices as they move forward is really good. So I'm pleased to be here, and so I try and put in what I can in my manner, however that is. Corrective actions, training, train. So one of the things that when I was in the Army as a leader, we were supposed to carry our CTT manual, Common Tasks and Training Manual, and with us. And so whenever there was downtime, we were on a boat, we were on a train, or on a deuce and a half, or we're out in the woods, you know, and there's some downtime, hip pocket training. So I'm supposed to break out the book and go over training and refresh, because the more repetition. So I try and do that up here too, and I call it hip pocket training from my old days in the Army, right? After action review. After we do something, I want to talk about an AAR, after action review. These guys call it a hot wash, but I call it the after action. All right, so training. And then finally, we have, training management oversight. management oversight. Management oversight. So these actually are reversed. So this should be 5 and that's 4. The point is you're monitoring, you're having management oversight, you're monitoring times and temperatures and keeping records of things, but actively managing rather than the whole HACCP program where you have to actually keep clipboards of everything. So there's temperature data loggers that you can put in your reefers, and it'll talk to your computer. You're in bed, asleep, or on vacation, and the data logger is still feeding information to your computer. So you know everything that's happening. Over at CIA, we had data loggers in the reefers, and if the reefers went down, if they broke, if they went into the temperature danger zone, the alarm would go, and it would go to the securities people, and then they could go and fix it and find out what was going on, or immediate corrective action. So do what you can. There's a whole bunch to it. So FDA, we talked about that. We talked about that. Yeah. All right. I'm going to close this off now and try and fuse all these things together. Thank you so much for hearing me, and I appreciate you. It's really fun for me. I don't know who really listens, but I would love to hear some feedback on what you all think. There was a couple of people. There was one, he's a retired Army person. He was a veterinarian or worked for the veterinarians, but he said that one of my podcasts was a good podcast, and it was identifiable to him. One of the other chiefs that I've worked with, I did the bromine podcast for him, so I looked into bromine and I learned more about bromine, chlorine bromine on ships rather than on land, in water, drinking water, and so he appreciated that. And so there's some people who reach out and let me know, but it's few and far between, so I would love to know your thoughts, ideas, maybe something else that I can clarify or bring to light. Yeah, I've been in 2015, I wanted to do this, and it's now 2024, and I'm just getting into it a little bit better. So all my best. Take care.